lions, they can eat my body, but they can't swallow my soul. So this is a kid's song that plays in the lobby of my children's ministry in Renton, and it is hilarious. Because you think about it and you're like, what is this? And the kids will run around singing it, and it's like this little 7-year-old, and you're like, you don't know what you're saying, do you? Not at all. And a lot of times this song, you think about, it was probably about Christian martyrs in the Colosseum and people who lost their lives to these lions. But there was one man who, for this phrase, was his reality. And that man was Daniel. And Daniel was a man who put his trust and his identity in God, and God was faithful to meet his needs. And when we place our identity and our trust in God, he never fails. So, who was Daniel? Because sometimes we don't really think about it. Daniel was an exile from Judah. Babylon had came in, conquered Judah, and Daniel was suddenly ripped away from everything that he knew. Daniel was Jewish nobility, taken into exile. And what Babylonians would do when they had conquered peoples is they would take them, and they would take their nobles, and they would pretty much just brainwash them. And they would take away their names, their clothes, their food, everything about their culture, everything, and they would fill them full of what their Babylonian ideas of perfection and authority were, so that they could go back to their respective peoples and say, you know what, Babylon's not that bad. We should follow Babylon. And this worked in almost every situation for not only Babylon, but tons of other kingdoms, except for Daniel. Though he had lost everything, they could not take his God. You can take the man out of the temple, but you can't take the temple out of the man. And because Daniel was faithful and he refused to give in, God gave him wisdom and understanding, it says in chapter 1, that was 10 times greater than that of any of the other magicians and enchanters who served the king. And in every situation, Daniel distinguished himself because his trust was in God. So in Daniel chapter 6, we see King Darius the Mede has come and now is king, and he appoints 120 satraps. And a satrap is an old Persian, pretty much governor. And one of these men was Daniel. And Daniel, because he had the favor of the Lord, did such a good job and distinguished himself among the king wanted to put Daniel in charge of the land. And this made all of the other men jealous. And a couple of them got together and they schemed and they said, we have got to get Daniel out of here. And they thought and they thought and they said, but Daniel does nothing wrong, ever. The only way we're ever going to be able to get him out of here is if we plot against his God. And so they schemed as schemers do, and they hatched a plan, and they came before the king and they said, oh, King Darius, may you live forever. We have this wonderful idea. You should make this law where for the next 30 days, no man can pray to anything or anyone except for you, O king. And if they break this law, they should be thrown into the den of lions. And King Darius, he said, okay. And he made this law, and he made it in with the law of the Medes and the Persians, and it was unbreakable. And so Daniel, hearing about this, went back to his room as he had every day, and he got down on his knees and he prayed to his God. And then these other jealous satraps came and they found him praying, and they went before the king and they said, "O king, did you not just make this law that said that everybody for the next 30 days can only pray to you? And if they break this law, they're going to be thrown into the den of lions?" And he said, "Yes, I did make this law." And they said, "Your servant Daniel has broken your law." And this anguished the king, because the king liked Daniel. And the king tried every way until sundown to try and find a loophole in his law, but it was unbreakable. And he couldn't. And so by the end of the day, he took Daniel down to the den and he said, "May your God, who you serve continually, rescue you." And then they threw Daniel in the den, and they rolled a stone in front of it, and the king placed his seal on the rock so that everybody would know that what has happened cannot be changed. And the king was in anguish all through the night. He couldn't sleep. None of his enchanters or his merrymakers could make him happy. And so at first daylight, he ran to the den and he called out and he said, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel answered, and he said, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, O king." And they pulled him out of the lion's den, and they found not a scar, not a scrape, not a bruise, anything on him, because Daniel trusted in God. And we look at this and we think, what is there to learn from Daniel? And we see in this story 3 things. The first is that in all of these circumstances, King Darius recognized in Daniel, and he said, "Your God who you serve continually." Even when his life was threatened, Daniel served God continually. He not only served him when it was easy and things were going well, he served him when it was hard. The next is that Daniel had his identity founded in God. He did not let Babylon or any king that he served in 70 years take away his faith. It was the one thing they could not take from him. He held on to his faith in God because that's what defined him. And we go through trials, and we go through these trials, our true character is revealed. And Daniel's character was founded on his relationship with God. And the third thing that we see is trust. Daniel trusted that God would protect him and that God had a plan. Even though he really couldn't see what it was, what plan could God have in getting eaten by lions? What testimony could come from getting eaten by lions? Daniel showed time and time again that he trusted fully in his God and that he served him above all others. And when the ultimate test came, he was able to face it with courage. I don't think this means that he wasn't absolutely terrified, because man-eating lions are terrifying. But I don't think, as we know, courage is the absence of fear. Courage is being able to stare down a lion and say, "My God can protect me. Oh, the lions, they can eat my body, but they can't swallow my soul." Because when we place our identity and our trust in God, he never fails us. We probably will never face exile. We will probably never face anything quite as terrifying as man-eating lions, but each of us has our own lion's den that we have to face. We have situations where we have to trust that God knows what he's doing. And though I haven't lived very long, for me, this happened when I had to move. because my parents are pastors, we move a lot, and usually that's just around Central California. And I don't think there was ever a time we were more than 2 hours away from any of our family. We knew exactly how we spent every Easter, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday. We had it all down to a science. We knew exactly where we were, who we were. And when I was 10, my parents told my brother and I that we were going to move to Washington because that's where God was calling us, kids. That's where we're going. And I remember just going into my room and just crying out in anguish, why do I have to leave? Because when you're 10, there's not really a lot that defines you yet, because you're 10 and you don't know who you are yet. And so I said, I'm going to have to leave all of my friends, all of my family. I don't know what this place is. I've never even heard of Seattle. What's Seattle? What is this? And so we sold pretty much everything we had, and we packed everything up in a moving van, and we made the 3-day trip up here. And I left the only life and the only extended family I'd ever known. But even though this was gut-wrenching, I had to hold on and say that my God would always be there for me, and no matter where I was, my God would define me. And I had to trust that He knew what He was doing because I couldn't see it. And I look back and I say, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be standing here. And God never disappointed me. I cannot promise that everything you do in the service of God will be easy. It will not always be safe. But I can tell you that we believe in a big God who is faithful, and to those who serve Him unconditionally, when it's easy and when it's hard, He never fails to be with them, even though you might not be able to see what good can come from wherever you are. But God has a plan for those who trust Him. And this morning, I charge you to keep trusting. What does your lion's den look like? It doesn't have to be something grand and exciting to be important. It doesn't have to be life-threatening. What do you place your trust in? Keep trusting. Keep following the Father, because when we place our identity and our trust in God, He never fails us.